8th November, 32nd Sunday of the Liturgical Year A. The readings. The first reading is taken from the Book of Wisdom, chapter 6, verses 12 to 16. The second reading is taken from the first letter of St. Paul to the Thessalonians, chapter 4, verses 13 to 18. And the Gospel is taken from Matthew, chapter 25, verses 1 to 13. The foolish ones said to the wise, "Give us some of your oil. Our lamps are going out." "No," they replied, "there may not be enough for both us and you. Instead, go to those who sell oil and buy some for yourselves." Matthew chapter 25, verses 8 and 9. My dear sisters and brothers, as we are approaching towards the end of the liturgical year, Matthew explains various aspects of preparedness from chapters 23 to 25, inviting us to be other-centered than to be self-centered. One may focus on today's parable as preparedness and the unknown hour, but a broad and deep reflection would help us to understand the context in a different manner. One may need to focus on chapters 23 to 25 to understand the message for a better clarity. In chapter 23, we read the warning and vows against the hypocrisy, and in chapter 24, the signs of end times and the unknown day and the hour. Finally, in chapter 25, we read the parables of 10 virgins and the bags of gold and the final judgment. The Gospel of Matthew is very radical in its message to the readers regarding the final judgment. It begins with the hypocrisy of the Pharisees and the Jewish leaders in chapter 23 and concludes the discourse with the separation of the sheep from the goats, the wicked from the righteous, and the good from bad, as we read in the final judgment in Matthew chapter 25, verses 31 to 46. In the light of this, we need to reread the Gospel of the day. Matthew begins the Gospel saying, "The story throws light on what will happen in the kingdom of heaven." It is indeed a direct link to the final judgment whereby the selfish, the uncharitable, and the unkind virgins' attitude towards their fellow mates needs to be carefully analyzed. In this regard, we can see certain remarkable characteristics in this parable, unlike in other stories, such as no reason why only 5 of them took oil, no reason for the delay of the bridegroom, and why there were no shops remain opened at the middle of the night, though it was a great wedding feast where everyone was expecting for the bridegroom to arrive. Thus, there would be a specific reason for placing this parable before the pronunciation of the final judgment in Matthew chapter 25, verses 31 to 46, which is followed by the Passion of Christ. The parable, first of all, invites us to ponder over the biblical saying, "Folly of God is wiser than human wisdom." 1 Corinthians chapter 1, verse 25. The parable doesn't directly indicate the sensibility or the wisdom of the 5 virgins, but rather it tells us about 2 types of virgins having opposed attitudes wise against foolish, haves against have-nots, and the rich against the poor, leading us to reflect on the destiny. It also invites us to ponder over the simplicity and the authenticity of the five virgins who were willing to take up the risk to collect oil even at the middle of the night. Having fully known about the odd hour and the unavailability of availing their task, they take a bold step in order to be eligible to the wedding feast. Furthermore, it embarrasses the readers more that the reply of the five sensible ones are not so convincing as they say there may not be sufficient for both us and you. It is visible from their statement that there was a lack of generosity from the part of these virgins to share what they had. Finally, we need to connect this parable in the light of the final judgment, where we read the passage which says, "He will reply to those on the left, 'Truly I tell you, whatever you did not do for one of the least of these, you did not do for me.'" The chapter concludes by this statement, whereby Jesus assures us to be kind, understanding, charitable, and caring. Based on this statement, we must be, unlike the five virgins, kind, considerate, and charitable to others. Hence, let us ask ourselves, do I ignore my brothers and sisters when they approach me? Do I close my door to my neighbors who cry to me in their difficulties? Let's, therefore, look into ourselves as well as to our brothers and sisters who are in need of our support and care, so that we find meaning and purpose in our lives and the lives of others as well. Amen.